Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else, this is John Paval. I'm back again today with another special edition to make sure that you know all about the Bowdoin International Music Festival's free of charge live stream of a concert this evening. The Friday, July 25th, the Bowdoin International Music Festival live streams top musicians playing Tango by Piazzolla, a Soviet-approved quintet by Shostakovich, and a NASA-inspired launch party by Chris P. Thompson. 7:30 in the evening, Eastern Daylight Time. And as we say in our blurb, yet another reason to follow and or subscribe to Access Arts Live. Before I go any further, let me remind you, if you're watching this on Facebook, please like the video. If you're watching on any of our other 6 platforms, please follow and or subscribe to Access Arts Live on YouTube, X, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and or LinkedIn. And we will continue to provide you with more than 1,000 live links to live performances every year. Now, let's get on to this concert. Now, there's a little bit of confusion about which piece is first, because the concert pieces order on YouTube and on the Bowdoin website are different. It's not clear whether it's the Piazzolla which goes first, which is a violin harp collaboration, or whether it's the launch party by a contemporary composer, Chris P. Thompson. But since launching something with a launch party piece makes sense to me, we can start with that. But let me give you more precisely. The different pieces are Astor Piazzolla's L'Histoire du Tango, the history of the tango, Chris P. Thompson's launch party, and Dmitri Shostakovich's piano quintet in G minor, opus 57. The history of the tango is played by Eugene Jang on the violin and June Han on the harp. I'll tell you more about all of the players as I go through this. The Chris P. Thompson piece is played by festival expert Luke Rinderknecht on the marimba and vibraphone. He's identified as a percussionist, and it's so easy to forget that percussion also includes melodic instruments like the vibraphone, the xylophone, the marimba, etc. And he'll be accompanied by several festival fellows, and I'll tell you who they are when we get to that. Then there's the Shostakovich Piano Quintet. That's with on the piano is Eleanor Freer, and Mikhail Koppelman and Meg Freivogel on the violin, Liz Freivogel on the viola, and Daniel McDonnell on the cello. And you see all of them pictured there, grouped together the way they're going to play together. So isn't that clever? Isn't that great? Anyway, so now let's proceed to the let's start talking first then about this launch party by Chris Thompson. And there you see the picture. There's Luke Rinderknecht, who's the sort of a resident percussionist for this festival, tearing a piece of paper, because I guess that's percussion too. Anything which is non-melodic, I guess. And with him, Claire Arias Kim, Amanda Chi, and Yang Gao. Let me tell you about the piece first, and I'll tell you a little about them. I have a note, actually, from Chris P. Thompson describing it. I've abridged it a little bit. Let me just read it to you in the author's own words so you get that. He says, I had been waiting for an excuse to dive deep into the wonderful NASA audio archive when I was asked to write something for Rocket City New Music's opening concert of 2022. So, set in the aerospace hub of Huntsville, Alabama, I had a chance to write music for a curious and scientifically minded audience who would likely be familiar with the sources of that material. Browsing through the database, I asked myself, what rhythm and pitch material are contained in these sounds? Could any of them be, for example, time stretched, pitch shifted, looped, chopped into bits, processed, etc., in order to make them serve musical functions? I was thrilled to discover not only how vast their online offerings are, but also how approachable everything is. Learning about the sources of these sounds and the missions they came from was a pure joy. And I have tried to infuse that joy throughout the piece. Wow. So if you want to enjoy at least something that was created to promote joy in you, this is it. Luke Rinderknecht is on the faculty at the Cleveland Institute of Music and Cleveland State University. He made his debut with the Cleveland Orchestra years ago, performing Paul Creston's Marimba Concerto. And if you know me, which you may not, I love Paul Creston. If you don't know his music, look it up. His sonata for saxophone and piano is out of this world. It makes me cry every time. Anyway, and he's appeared on several albums, Grammy Award-winning albums with the Buffalo Philharmonic's recording of Mr. Tambourine by John Corigliano, for example. And he's a percussionist who went to Juilliard to get his bachelor's and master's. So it's a top guy. Now, next is the violinist Claire Arias Kim, 23-year-old. She's working on her master's at Juilliard, where she already got her BA, but she's already soloed with a number of symphonies. Now, no, not the New York Phil, the Fairbanks Symphony Orchestra, the Elgin Symphony Orchestra, the Lincolnwood Chamber Orchestra, the Ottawa Chamber Orchestra, but she's out there pitching, which is great. And she's won first place in a couple of music competitions. Then next on the cello, is Amanda Chai. She's Taiwanese Canadian, and she's working on her artist diploma at the Royal College of Music. And she's got her bachelor's from the New England Conservatory and master's from Juilliard, a second master's from Yale. And she's already performed at Carnegie Hall, the National Concert Hall in Taipei. She's a substitute musician with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, etc. And she has led a few orchestras, the Yale Philharmonia, the Juilliard Orchestra, and others. So she's a comer too. And finally on the piano is Yang Gao, born in Dalian, China. We're told he's competed in the Leeds and Chopin competitions, but we're not told that he won anything in them. He got his bachelor's from University of Cincinnati Conservatory and a master's from Mannes School of Music. He's now working on his doctorate at where else? The Peabody Institute or Peabody Conservatory, oldest conservatory in the United States of America. So those are the people who will be working on playing this wonderful piece about launch based on NASA sounds transformed for musical purposes, designed to bring you joy. I don't know how you beat that. Well, I'll tell you one way you can beat that. You can beat that is maybe you prefer tango, as created by the master of the tango, Piazzolla. Incidentally, Piazzolla, like Gershwin, went to Paris when he was younger and tried to get Nadia Boulanger to teach him how to compose better. And she told both of them, I can't help you. You go back and be yourself. That's much better than anything I can teach you. Anyway, this piece is called The History of the Tango, which was originally scored for flute and guitar, which are tango instruments, back in 1985, but it's often adapted. I don't know if it's ever been adapted for violin and harp before, but it is for this performance. And it's in 4 parts, which are adapted to the 4-part history of the tango. Its beginnings in the beginning and around 1900, which according to Piazzolla, and some musicologists don't agree with this, but Piazzolla says it grew up in the bordellos, the houses of prostitution, back in the early 1900s. Then in the 1930s, there's a section called Continental Cafe. And in the 1930s, people stopped dancing to it and just listened to it, and it got slowed down, and they started forming. It wouldn't just be like a guitar and a flute. It would be a couple of violins, some concertinas, a piano, a bass, a little tango orchestra. Then in the 1960s is the nightclub era, when it becomes international, and Buenos Aires was sort of a center for both Argentine and Brazilian music. And then there's the modern day concert tango, where composers like Bartók and Stravinsky have drawn on it for inspiration. So And who are these two players? On the violin, Yujin Zhang. She's on the faculty at the Eastman School of Music. She won the 2017 Concert Artist Guild competition. And she was the first prize winner of the 2016 Sende International Music Competition. She's done recitals at Carnegie Hall, at Jordan in Boston. She's toured with musicians from Marlborough, and she's got a couple of albums out of Mendelssohn and Stravinsky violin concertos with that Sende Philharmonic Orchestra, and another recital disc with music of Mendelssohn, Stravinsky, Grieg, Sibelius, with pianist Kei Ozawa. And she's a co-founder of the Kalachi String Quartet. So busy. June Han on the harp. She's a faculty member everywhere at Yale, Peabody, Columbia University, and Juilliard Pre-College. Her mother's is a young Jia Li, who's a well-known composer, and June Han, she studied at three distinct places: at the Paris Conservatory, at the Yale School of Music, and then the Juilliard School. So she's gotten around. Interesting framing of what started out as guitar and flute and becomes violin and harp. Love to hear what that's going to sound like. By two, sounds like young but expert musicians. And then finally, we come to the quintet, the Shostakovich Quintet. I will tell you about the musician first and then finish up with a little bit of a story about the quintet, so we have kind of a wow finish to this brief interlude together. Playing on this piece, you have Eleanor Freer on the piano. You have Mikhail Koppelman, a very distinguished, long-standing violinist. Meg, and then you have most of the pieces of the Jupiter quartet. You have Meg Freivogel, her sister Liz Freivogel, and her husband Daniel McDonough. So they're only missing one of the other members from that the quartet in order for you to be able to say, well, it's the Jupiter Quartet. The Jupiter Quartet, together with the Ying Quartet, opened this week on Tuesday. They did a concert together at the Bowdoin Festival, which you can find in replay, but I don't recommend it. I strongly recommend only listen to things live. And the artists are pouring out their hearts, minds, and souls for you and everybody else in the in-person and remote audience. It's a social event of sharing beauty and truth. But anyway, now let's talk about this. Who is Eleanor Freer? She's on the piano faculty of the Eastman School of Music, and she's a good teacher. She won the 2025 Eisenhardt Award for Excellence in Teaching, and so I mention it. I like people who are good at teaching. She's originally from Montana, but she's performed all over the U.S. and Europe, Mexico, China, at many of the usual places like the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam, the Gergiev Festival in Rotterdam, the Akademie Muzikich in Prague, which I am not that familiar with, the Ganessin Institute, which is where everybody goes to start out in Moscow. And she also had a period when she founded and directed music residencies in rural Kansas and Montana, performing on street corners, schools, psychiatric hospitals, grocery stores, jails, you name it. And I love it when people do that. And she's also working with researchers at the University of Rochester Medical Center on piano training program for adults with cognitive impairment. Then there's Mikhail Koppelman, who's also on the faculty at the Eastman School of Music since 2002, and he was formerly at the Yale School of Music. He's a real top guy from Russia. He went to the Moscow Conservatory and ended up being on the faculty of the Moscow Conservatory, teaching solo violin and string quartet. He played in the Bolshoi Theater Orchestra. He was concertmaster of the Moscow Phil. And then in 1993, moved to the United States. And in 2002, he formed the Koppelman Quartet here. And listen, if I gave you the list of the festivals he played at, he's played at them all. So just know what all of them are. And he's worked with, used to work closely with Sviatoslav Richter, and he's got recordings on a half a dozen different recording labels, including Philips and Wigmore Live. So now let's get to these members of the Jupiter String Quartet. Meg Freivogel, They're all on the faculty of the University of Illinois, where the Jupiter String Quartet is the resident quartet. And so Meg is also known as Megan, is the second violinist and one of the founding members of the Jupiter String Quartet, which is made up of her siblings that she grew up playing with. Went to the Cleveland Institute of Music and the New England Conservatory. And she's got, as a group, they have won the grand prize at the Banff International String Quartet, the Fisher Chamber Music competitions, the Cleveland Quartet Award, et cetera, et cetera. And they played everywhere from Carnegie Hall to the Kennedy Center to Wigmore Hall to you name it. And they've recorded Shostakovich, Britten, Mendelssohn, and Beethoven for Marcus Records, but also Deutsche Grammophon. And Meg is one of the founding members of East Coast Chamber Orchestra, that conductorless chamber orchestra where they bring together all these chamber musicians. Because, well, a chamber quartet, they don't have a conductor. So, well, what the hell? Let's have 30 chamber musicians, create a full-scale orchestra, but we still won't have a conductor. How about a concert master, maybe? Then there's Liz Freivogel. She's on the viola. Everything I just said about Megan, I could say about Liz. But she also has individually won some prizes at the places like the Primrose International Viola competition, the Oberlin Concerto competition. She's done a lot of visiting residencies at Oberlin, Peabody, Eastman, Cleveland Institute, San Francisco. So she likes to get around. Then there's Daniel McDonough on the cello. He's Meg's husband. He's on the cello faculty at Illinois. He's also involved with, as a founding member of that East Coast Chamber Orchestra. And what they get together a few times per year and do a lot of concentrated intensive rehearsing and a certain amount of concert touring. And I think they just came out with their first CD or DVD in this past year. So now this piece by Dmitri Shostakovich. What was the story I was going to tell you about it? Well, this piece was actually a Soviet-approved piece. Shostakovich played himself at the premiere in 1940. And he was playing it together with the quartet, the Beethoven Quartet, which was one of the leading Russian quartets at the time. And it received universal praise. The public loved it. Well, the public always loved his work, and the critics loved it. And he won a Stalin Prize for Arts and Sciences for it when they started that award in 1941. What's so unusual about this? Well, I'm telling you, back in 1934, he had an opera that came out, and the reaction of Uncle Joe Stalin and the culture minister was very negative. And it was so frightening and menacing to him, not because they spoke openly in menacing terms, but they just didn't like it. And they said so in print. So he was just finishing up his Fourth Symphony at the time, and he just put it away. That Fourth Symphony didn't get played until the 1960s. They just scared him out of it. So this is like 6 years later. He goes public with this string quartet, which, in terms of the kind of things that got criticized by the Soviets, if you were too effete, or overly sophisticated, that's the kind of thing they would attack. And yet here's a string quartet, and they loved it. Who knew? And then, I think it was 5 years later, the Fifth Symphony came out. Before the Fifth Symphony, 2 decades before the Fourth Symphony would come out. And there are an awful lot of similar riffs between the two. But anyway, I think that's a very interesting story. And now, I also want to mention one thing musicologically, even though I usually stay away from musicological commentary. The musicologists tell us that usually, in most piano quintets by people like Brahms and Franck, etc., they're very thickly orchestrated, with the strings competing with the keyboard. So they're sort of playing against each other. Not this one. In this one, the pianist plays at the extreme ends of the keyboard, and the strings are focused in the middle ranges of the instruments so that their voices are separated and not competing with each other. And that may be the only time you ever hear a musicological comment coming out of the mouth of John Paval. Listen, I wanted to do this separate piece on it, which turned out to be twice as long as I intended it to be, so you would know about it. And I will circulate this as a separate clip on all of our 6 or 7 platforms and on about 20 to 25 Facebook groups for music lovers and chamber music lovers, where we also post to give everybody a chance to enjoy what strikes me as being, you got the Piazzolla tango stuff. You got this wild stuff by Chris Thompson based on NASA sounds designed to promote joy in you. And then you have a lovely piece by Shostakovich, which Uncle Joe Stalin actually liked and the public loved. So hard to do that all at the same time, but he pulled it off. So I highly recommend this to you, and it's free of charge, and it's on YouTube. So if you do go there, I also and the chat box is open. Please jump in on the chat box and say, "Hey, Access Arts Live sent us," because we're trying to send as many people as we can to these terrific live streams, which are free of charge to the public. It's a gift, an absolute gift. Ciao for now. I'll be back on Monday with the usual beginning of the week roundup, and I'll be telling you about all the remaining live streams from Bowdoin and from the Seattle Chamber Music Society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bye.